What's up, YouTube? It's Adam Grover. Come back at you with another video. Now, I've kind of gone over this stuff in the past, but I want to go over it again. I actually got a guy who needs help with exactly what I'm about to talk about, so I figured make a video that can help him, but it's going to help other people. Everybody's got to start somewhere, and you might get a car because you get in a race in or whatever the deal might be, but nobody knows right off the bat. I mean, I grew up with this stuff. I watched my dad do it. I watched a lot of other people do it, NMRA racers. I've seen problems at young ages where it's like, it's off the wall crap that you wouldn't even believe some of it. But I want to get into, when you buy a car, what do you do if you don't know absolutely anything? Now, this is a rabbit hole video because things can spiral out of control. So I'm going to try to cover every basis for people to understand. So, I got to grab a couple things. I got some stuff on the bench here, but there's an important piece that I want to grab and show. If I can get it out of the box. All right. So the first thing you want to do, you buy a car. Now it depends what you buy. But I'm talking, let's say you buy something carbureted. It's old school. It's got a distributor in it. And if you don't know what that stuff is, we're going to cover that, so hold tight. But it's carbureted, got a distributor. In this guy's case, it's got a big block Chevy. Small block Ford, big block Ford, small block Chevy, big block Chevy, small block Mopar, big block Mopar, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, doesn't matter what it is. This is a general basis video on what to look at, what to check, and go over and make sure everything's good. First thing, you're going to want to figure out firing order. You're going to want to figure out what you have engine-wise. The heads, the cam. Get as much information as you can on the vehicle that you're buying or bought. And if you don't know what you got, it's alright. You can figure it out most of the time. There's numbers on the head surfaces. You can figure that stuff out. Cams are a little tricky. There is ways of finding out what cam you have. If you buy something real old with like a flat tappet cam, you got to worry about problems like I had, having a wiped cam. And if you don't know what to listen for, you'll never know. You just think, oh, it needs a tune-up, and you got a wiped cam. So it's stuff to watch out for. That's why you want to find out what the engine is as much as possible, as much info as you can. So you got to figure out firing order. Every engine has one. Figure out what you got. In this guy's case, big block Chevy's going to have a big block Chevy firing order. Same as small block Chevy. Small block Ford had two different firing orders. Big block Ford, as far as I know, only has one. Mopars, I can't even touch base on a Mopar. Never owned one. I don't know. It's something I'd have to learn myself. Perfect example. But it's important because that's what runs the engine, is the firing order. It's got to be right, no matter what. So this is a distributor. Okay. Most your distributors will look similar to this. Now, it might not have this piece on it. This is an electronic distributor for a fuel-injected vehicle in the 80s, 90s. It's for a Mustang, actually. But it'll have a cap. Inside, it'll have a rotor. I can get the cap off. That's your rotor. Okay. Distributor gear. This is important. If you have a flat tappet cam, hydraulic roller, solid roller, there are different gears that you need to run on a distributor. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's small block Ford, big block Ford, Chevy, Mopar, whatever. When it comes to what type of cam is in it, flat tappet, hydraulic roller. If it's hydraulic flat tappet, it's usually the tappets. If it's got a flat tappet cam, I believe it's a cast gear you want. If it's a hydraulic roller, depending on the size of the hydraulic roller, you want a steel gear or a bronze gear if it's a huge hydraulic roller. If it's solid roller, bronze gear. The reason for that is so it doesn't eat the cam gear. So on your cam, you have this gear right here. If I were to put that distributor, this distributor right here, because this has a steel gear, hardened gear, if I were to put that in with this cam, this would be non-existent on this camshaft. Okay? Because this is a flat tappet cam. It's made from a soft metal. And this will actually eat away because of that hardened shaft or hardened gear. Okay? This is all stuff to look out for. If you buy a running car, it's something to check. But you got to know your firing order. Now, what I mean by firing order is the sequence that these plug wires, these are your plug wires, they go to each cylinder, what they fire in. Small block Ford is like 1, 3, 7, 2, 6, 5, 4, 8, if I'm not mistaken. Chevy has its own. There's also another one for small block Ford, 154. They switch like 2 cylinders or something. It's stupid. But you want to get your firing order, and you want to make sure that that's right. You need to verify that that is correct. That is very important. If it's wrong, the car's going to run like complete crap. And sometimes you can cross 2 of these wires, and it'll almost sound like the car's running okay. It'll just have a slight miss. And you'll rev it up, and it might... You might sting it like a... or something like that. You got to have an ear to hear it. If you're new to this, you're most likely not going to have the ear. All right, it's just how it is. This is stuff you learn through time, dealing with it, listening to it, you know. So that's something you got to verify, though, your firing order. Make sure that every plug wire is in the correct sequence. You can usually find your firing order online. Google it, and they'll pop up. Just make sure it's the right one for your particular setup. Check the firing order. Then you're going to go into checking timing. So you're going to need a timing light. Now, I think my timing light is actually in the wagon outside, and it's like 40-something degrees out. I'm not walking out there right now. But all it is, it looks like almost like a firearm, and it blinks. There's a piece that wraps around the plug wire, right? It goes on your number 1 spark plug wire. You have a power and a ground that goes to, it could go to any power under the hood battery. And then the ground, you can, as long as it's grounded, it could go in the engine, the battery, whatever that wire can reach, it can go to. If you only have a solenoid under the hood, you can go to the solenoid. As long as it has a power source and it can light, it'll work. All right. Now, before you go checking timing, you need to make sure that the balancer is marked. This is your balancer. Okay. This is the pulley on the crankshaft, essentially. It's really a balancer on the crankshaft. But every vehicle is going to have some type of balancer on it, or a pulley that has timing marks. Now, this has a lot of timing marks on it. This is an aftermarket balancer. If you have a factory balancer, you're probably, most likely, 90% of the time, it only has 1 set of marks. Okay? Now, you should have a timing pointer on the vehicle, on the engine. If you have a digital light, like I recommend getting, that has a dial on it, or you can program it so you can set the timing on the gun. Say 20 degrees of total timing. You want to set that on the gun. It's going to blink at 20 degrees. So when you're setting your timing, I mark a balancer at 0. The reason I mark it at 0 is because I will move that around. What I mean by moving it around is if I'm setting something at 20 degrees of timing, that 0 is essentially going to go 20 degrees away from that timing pointer. So the gun will move that balancer back to its timing mark. So it lines up with the mark. Because all you're doing is setting that mark with the timing mark. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's so easy. So easy to do. All you got to do is loosen your distributor up, and you turn the distributor one way or the other, and that mark will either go this way or that way in comparison to the timing pointer on the block. Timing pointer is just something that sits there. It usually hangs out on the bouncer. I don't have one handy to show you guys at the moment. I don't even know where the one off my engine is, to be honest with you. But, so all you're doing is matching the mark, essentially. But if you play with the light, say you go to 25, say you set your engine to 20 degrees and you change the light to 25, you're going to put it on, that mark's going to move. It's not going to be aligned. All right? Now, if it's got a factory distributor in it, you're going to have an initial timing and you're going to have a total timing. Okay? They're two totally different numbers. So initial, you might have, say, 10 degrees of timing. And then when you rev it up and it gets past, say, 3,000, 3,500, all your total most likely is going to be in. Depends on how that distributor's curved. That's what they call it. Or how it's set up. They have springs inside of them, some of them. If it's a mechanical advanced style distributor, they have springs and weights in them. And with RPM, they actually spring out and fly open. And that brings in your total timing. So, let's say you put a timing light on your car. You're matching that mark up. Your balancer's marked at 0, and you got that mark matched up. Now, you can take... Mine has a turn dial on it. Let me grab it so I can show you guys, because it's hard to explain. Pretty sure it's in this car. Seeing it in the car is going to be the hard problem, because it's dark out here. Alright, let's see. Is it in here? This thing's a mess. There it is. What I don't want to do is rip the end off of it. Alright. Alright. Show you how this works. This way you guys get a better general understanding of how the timing light works and what I'm talking about. Flip it around. That's your timing light. This is what I'm talking about when I say it's got a dial on it. Some of them are programmable. You just hit the arrows up and down and it has like a screen. Tells you, some of them are actually pretty cool. It tells you like RPM. It tells you timing. That's the light, right? And it's bright, so never shine it in your face. This goes on your spark plug, number 1 spark plug. This is hot or power. This is ground. All right, this is like a $400 timing light. It's old now, probably about 10 years old. So these are timing. And when, for this particular light, you hold this, and that's when it flashes. So if I'm not holding the button, this won't flash. Okay? It'll just be hooked up, won't do a thing. If I press the button, that's when it starts flashing. So you can see whatever I had in this is set to 36 degrees. That's going to be my total. If you have something initial, you should never be this high. Unless you have like a super tight curve. I mean, where it only advances like 3 or 4 degrees. And usually they all advance at least 10. From what I know. They just advance at different times. The weights and springs, usually when they spring out, it's just sooner. That's all that really controls. But if you know about that, then you're getting into, you already know this stuff most likely. All right. So let's say you're setting something factory distributor in it or something with a mechanical advance inside of it. You can start at 10 degrees. All right, initial, which is what it's going to be at idle. That's going to get you running. All right. 15 will get you running. That's not really going to kill something at idle. But if you have a lot of advance on the distributor curve, this 15 can go up to like, say, 40 degrees roughly. Which might be too much in some circumstances. It really depends on how the distributor's curve, like I just said, and how soon it comes in. But just to get something running, 10 to 15 degrees, and then you can play with it after. If you can make it this far, then you can play with it after, okay? Now, most combinations, this is general rule of thumb. For an old school small block or big block, they like timing. Steelhead, especially with steelheads, you can usually pump every bit of 35 degrees and something total. So that's over 3,000 RPM. So when you got this on, looking at the crank, looking at your balancer, and you're holding the button down, and you're set this to 35. So you're set to 35. You're aimed, ready, fire, and you turn the distributor, and you set that engine to 35 degrees and lock it down. Meaning by lock it down means the distributor bolt, because you want it tight. All right? And that's it for timing. Now you're set. That's your total timing. You're going to rev that up to 3,000. You might say, well, how do I know it's 3,000? You're going to sit in the car. You're going to rev it up with your foot after you get it running. You're going to take it to 3 grand on your tack. And you're going to listen. This is how you build the ear. All right? Listen for 3,000. You go, all right. Now I know what 3,000 RPM sounds like. Now, you don't want to hold this thing for an hour at 3,000. But you want to get the general, when you're comfortable saying, yeah, I think I know what it sounds like. You hold it there for a minute and you let off. Hold it there for a minute and let off. Might sound redundant, but eventually you're going to get the ear. Eventually you're going to be able to rev something up and you're going to be able to get it pretty close to 3,000, if not 3,000, 35, whatever. All right? So 3,000 to 3,500, usually your full total timing is in by that RPM. Now, how you're going to check that to make sure you don't overtime your engine. Got it at 35 degrees. You're going to hold the light and you're going to zing it. What I mean by that is you're just going to rev it up. You're going to rev it hard and let off. You're going to just take the carburetor, whack it full throttle, and let it rev. Right? It's going to sound like you're trashing it. Like you're just beating the snot out of it. That's what you're going to do, though. And you're going to hold the light and you're going to look at the light. You're not even going to look at the carburetor. You're going to look at the light. So your right hand's going to whack it. Your left hand should be holding the light on that timing pointer and making sure that that line holds steady at total timing at 35 degrees at that timing pointer. Because if it goes past it, especially if you're on a power outer, that's a big problem. Now, I mentioned power adder because the vehicle my buddy hit me up about has nitrous on it. That's going to be a whole nother tuning session video because I can't get into all of that. We're already at 20 minutes on this, and I haven't even covered the full basis yet. So now you got that where you're timed. Now, in doing this, if your firing order's right, your timing's set right, it should be pretty snappy, even at 35 degrees. Now, some engines might want more than 35. This is when you got to take it to the track, and you got to try it, and you got to either go up 2 degrees at a time or down 2 degrees at a time. If you're at 35, personally, I'd go up 2 degrees at a time and make passes. So you start at 35, you go to the track, you make a pass. You come back in the pits, turn it from 35 to 37. You make another pass, and you keep doing that until it slows down. Now, if it slows down going from 35 to 37, you're going to come back down 1 degree to 36. And this is when you got to start studying slips, because it might pick up mile an hour, it might pick up 60 foot, it might pick up ET. So you got to see where you're gaining, where you're losing, so you got to study the slip. That's why a time slip's so important. Now, with the Fairmont, I did this whole thing where I showed it progress. We went from like a 1680 to like a low 16 with just turning the distributor. Okay, like a 1630, I think, or something. I got it written down somewhere. All right, so it can make a big difference going from something where somebody had it timed, or even factory had it timed, and now you're adding timing in it. All right. Now, if everything's timed and this car still sounds like crap, then it's either wiped cam, if it's flat tap it. If it's popping, spitting, and it sounds like it's out of time, that could possibly be a wiped cam. It could be something broke. That's when you got to start digging into it. Or it could be carburetor related. It really depends on the breakup. If it's usually like a quick breakup, that could be spark usually when it's quick. It don't take much spark wise. And what I mean by that could be a coil going weak, could be a bad coil, intermittent. It could be a distributor pickup. There's a lot of problems you could run into. Now, before I get into carburetors, there's something I do want to point out, and it was the whole reason I grabbed the balancer. You see this balancer right here. This balancer is solid. Okay, it has nothing here. This is an aftermarket balancer, like I stated previously. A lot of factory balancers have rubber in them. And what happens is that rubber dry rots. This is a common problem on small block Ford. But it dry rots, and the the balancer, the timing ring, actually turns. Now, there's two problems with this. It can throw a motor out of balance. This is your balancer. And with that spinning, it'll actually start making the crank vibrate. Two, your timing is going to be off. You'll never be able to get it right with a spun balancer. So it's something you want to look at. If you try to time a car and you got everything right and you're beating your brains out trying to figure this out, 9 times out of 10, that's your problem. Now, the other problem is, like I said, that cam gear. I've had cars where you'll time it, it'll be good. You rev it, and the thing sounds like crap after giving it a good and the thing will sound good, or you might drive it even. Depends on how that cam or distributor gear gets worn. We had one where the distributor gear was worn, and it was just skipping. And now it's throwing timing out. So we set it, it'd be good. Take the car for a ride, thing starts running like crap, we bring it home, we check it, out of time. So that's stuff to look out for, all right? It's not super common, but it's stuff I've ran into where it's like, man, what is going on with this thing? And it's stuff I've ran into at a young age. Like, I'm talking like late teens, like 19, 20, 21 years old. And at that time, I mean, let's be real, you usually don't know a lot by then, unless you're like heavy, like had a car since you were 13, you know. Everybody has a different background. But I've had problems like that. You drive the car and out of nowhere the thing just runs like crap and it's like, what is going on? You check it, it's out of time, and it's either the camshaft bad or that distributor gear could be worn if it has a bronze one on it. Even if it's cast and it's just not matching up right. A cast gear will wear on a distributor, the cast gear, if you put that on the distributor and put it with a hydraulic roller, it'll wear the gear on the distributor. Has the opposite effect of the hardened gear with the flat tappet cam. Alright? So it's stuff you look out for. And I'm stressing it a lot. I'm going over myself a lot because I want to make sure you guys look for this stuff because it's important if you have a problem. It's only if you have a problem. If you time this thing and you're good, you don't need to even worry about it at the moment. But keep it in the back of your head in case you come over or come across the problem like that, because it'll have you beating your brains out for days, weeks, if you just think nothing of it. Alright? So next we're going to get into carburetors and messing with them. Don't mind the bench, it's a mess. I had a box break and I had to pull the soda out of the box and shove it up here, but jagged metal. Alright, so this is a carburetor. Alright, a lot of you guys that are into this stuff are going to know it. Or if you just bought a carbureted car, then you might know what it is already. So we're going to take this apart. These require coming apart. Some of these have bolts, some of them have screws. Alright, I'm going to explain a lot of the crap in a carburetor. I'm just trying to make this a little easier so when we start getting into it, we can just hop right into it. So I'm going to pull some of these bolts out. This is just finger tight because it's a carburetor that I was going to toss together for the wagon and ended up never trying it. Alright. Of course this one's going to give me a problem. There we go. Pick that up before it gets lost. Alright. So your carburetor. Try to put this together a little bit. Probably shouldn't have pulled that bolt out, but alright. So trying to give you guys the full effect here. I'm gonna hold this together. This is your throttle right here. This is where your cable's gonna go pop onto, or throttle linkage. Alright. And it works. Let me turn the light on. And it works the butterflies inside. Alright. Now when you hit this, that hits this pump. This pump moves. Notice how it goes down? Hits this arm right here. This arm goes down. It hits this pump. Inside here is a diaphragm. If I can get the camera to adjust. There's a diaphragm in here. That's your pump shot. Now your pump goes to the squirter. So this primes the carburetor to send it fuel immediately. Alright? So these are something you're going to be playing with. Now, most carburetors come with 32s in them right from the rip. This has a 28 in the front and a 32 in the back. Okay. It's hard for me to see. I can see it better on camera. Now, those 4 bolts I just pulled out, you're going to end up taking them out. This here is your float. So if you have a carburetor like this, you're going to pull this sight glass out. When you set this float, you're going to need a wrench and a flathead screwdriver. It's usually pretty common on all of them. When you set this, fuel should just trickle out of this when you shake the car. You need the car on a level surface and you're just going to, I usually lean my hip against the car and just push with my hip. Might be an explicit motion for YouTube, so I can't show you guys that. But now, under this arm, let's see if I can get a better look. There's a cam, all right? All it is a little lobe, and it's how fast that pump shot activates. There you go, you can see it. It's just a little piece of poly, plastic, hardened. And there's one on this side. You can see it right there. I'll point to it right here. All right, that's your cam. This is your cam for the secondaries on this side. So this is your secondaries. These are your primaries. Because you primarily will run on these. These are your secondaries. They come in second. All right. Now this is a double pumper. What that means is it's mechanical secondary. All right. Some people call vacuum secondaries, I guess double pumpers too, but because it's, I don't know. But I've seen people do it. But double pumper, this is a true double pumper. It's got a pump in the back and a pump up front. All right. So that's actually what a double pumper is. So this comes off, and that's your float. Kind of makes sense how it works now, right? You got a needle and seat inside of here. Okay, which you really aren't going to mess with if you're at this level. All right, there's no reason to change it unless you're going to put a new one in and rebuild the carburetor. Okay, this float, I can already tell you, is probably too high. Usually right about there. This is the hole for the pump shot, so it actually runs through this channel right here. Fuel sits inside of here. Oh, it is a spring and a diaphragm inside of this little box. You can see the spring. And then the diaphragm, you can kind of see it in there. Now this is missing a power valve, so I'll grab one. I'll show you guys what a power valve is. If I can get the box open. So I'm actually going to put this in. I'll show you how it goes in. So on the back side of this, it's missing a lot of stuff. It's missing jets too. Back side of this just turns in. If I can get it to go in. There it goes. Okay, that's your power valve. Now, to check this, or to get the proper power valve reading, I should say, you got to plug into a vacuum port and put a gauge on it. All right. Now what I do is I load the vehicle and I find the highest vacuum reading. I don't care if it's a stick, if it's an automatic. I do it pretty much the same way. I'll put the car in gear, I'll hold the brake, and I load the car. And I look for the highest vacuum reading on this gauge. This is really filthy. All right. So you can see the inches of vacuum. That's what you're going to be using, is inches of vacuum. All right. Got to clean this cover on this, but you want to find the highest reading on inches of vacuum as you load the vehicle. That's how I do it. So that's how I would go about tuning this carburetor after it's set up and running. Okay, so you're gonna need a vacuum gauge when you mess with this stuff. It's old school way of doing it. You got guys who don't even run these, they put block offs in, and then you got guys that have their own way of doing it. That's the way Holly pretty much says to do it, with a little twist. Now in these two spots are your jets. I'm going to grab those so you guys can see what jets are. I got a whole thing. This is all Holly stuff. It's a jet kit right here. I'm just going to grab a set of jets because I don't care what they are, because I'm not keeping them in there. But they have numbers on them. So let's see what I grabbed. think this is like 90 something. These are 92s. Flip this. See if taking the flash off helps. Yeah, it does. 92. All right, so you go off of this number. And what that is the size of this hole in here. That's the orifice size. It's a 92. Now, this is way overjetted for this. This is a 600 carburetor. Okay, so what you would use this on, you should never need a 92 jet. I'm just showing you guys where these go, if I can get it to turn in. So these are your jets. Okay. So these, you're going to mess with these at wide open throttle. Alright. So power valve usually is like the transition when you're matting it to the floor. So if you have a bad dead spot or something where the car kind of bogs out, it's usually power valve. It could be float level. I've seen that happen. Could also be these screws. These are your idle mixture screws. You have an idle screw to set your idle for when the car is sitting there idling. And then you have these idle mixture screws that will rich in and lean it out. These also affect part throttle. So it's when you start tilting in on full throttle, these actually will transition. You'll hit this transition, and then just run off jet at wide open. Okay? And not to mention, you have this. So when you first sting it, you have this, these, then this, or then this, and then this. Alright? Now, it is important to know how it transitions throughout the carburetor, because it comes into tuning when you go to tune it. Okay? So all this stuff matters. So now that we know what the parts are, I'll try to get this on so that way it's together. And then these are your boosters. These round things with like the line through them in the middle, if you don't already know. I might have to set you guys down to in. Of course, no matter where I set the phone, it doesn't go. Now on a carburetor you have gaskets. This has no gaskets on it because it's in the process. It's going to be rebuilt. So make sure you definitely have gaskets on. I don't want somebody seeing this video and going, oh, he didn't have a gasket on that carburetor. Just make sure you got everything where they go. And it's important because the gaskets need to line up with the holes. So you'll buy a gasket kit for the number on your carburetor. They all have a serial number or part number. This one's on the choke tower. It's 4776-1. I believe that's what that is. Or 8, I can't tell. Not at this angle. I'll have to flip it up. 6. 4776. It's a list number. Alright. So you can look this number up and you can find exactly what this carburetor is. It'll probably tell you the color and all that fancy stuff. These are your boosters right here. These will run the fuel into the carburetor. These are air bleeds. Okay, they suck air in through them, and you can lean or richen a carburetor up by playing with these. Older Hollies don't have adjustable, like this one doesn't. These aren't adjustable. You have to press these in and out to change them. Newer carburetors have adjustable ones. You can pull them out and just change them like how you can with the jet that's inside here. So you're tuning your car. When you tune the car, you're going to need spark plugs. You're going to read these. What I mean by that is, get this to adjust. This right here is timing on your strap. So you'll be able to read timing on this. Okay, now me, I like a lot of timing. This keeps not wanting to focus. So me, I like it where the timing wraps around the strap. Alright. This is drivability right in here. This is a little on the rich side. Some people might say this is good. This is where difference in tuning comes to play, because it's got a nice brown color. When you're doing something wide open, down in this, you kind of see it's real light down in there. It's darker up top than it is down bottom. That's the fuel ring for when you're wide open throttle. Okay, so that's what you're going to tune off. They make a sight glass. I don't own one, but they make a sight glass where you can see the fuel ring, or you can cut the plug open and do it that way. But that's for more so guys that are serious. If you're just a guy trying to go out and have some fun, then you can get by without doing all that. Okay, it's real technical information. I'll put it to you this way: I've never cut a plug open in my entire life. Now, am I leaving some power on the table? Possibly, but I can usually see the fuel ring pretty good in here. Maybe not perfect, but I look down in there. I try to get the best look I can, and then I also use a wideband air fuel gauge when I tune stuff. I like using a wideband. I use it as a tool. I've talked about it in the past, but I always verify that the plug matches the reading on the wideband. Now, when you're using a wideband, they have numbers. It's a gauge. I get a digital one. You don't want a narrow band, you want a wide band. Now, what they do is you have an O2 sensor that goes into your exhaust, and it'll tell you if the car's lean, it'll tell you if it's rich. Now, if you have a V8, rule of thumb, an old school V8, you want it around 12.8 is stoich, or perfect. Anywhere from 12.5, 12.8, 12.3, and 12.5 are richer. So the lower the number, the more rich it is. The higher the number, the more lean it is. So wide open, you want roughly 12.5, 12.8. Now you're going to be playing with this later on, but to start out, let's say you got a carburetor, you put a wideband in it, and the thing's either pig rich or lean. You're going to, it depends if it's wide open throttle, but let's just stick to wide open throttle. It's pig rich or lean, you're going to change jetting. You're going to break that carburetor back down, and you're either going to put a bigger jet if it's lean, or a smaller jet if it's rich. Okay? And the plug's going to tell you all. If a plug's too lean, it'll usually be white. It'll usually be hot in the cylinder. If an engine is too rich, the plug will read black. It might even be wet. Okay? So this porcelain should really be white. If you're driving around on the plug, it's going to look similar to this. Just because this is on the richer side. This is more rich than I would like, which I already knew. This is out of my car. I already knew it was on the richer side because it's overcarbureted. But it's harder on plugs. So I would just have to change these more frequently. This is also a really cold plug. That's another thing you got to watch out for, having the correct plug in the engine for what you're doing, because there's different plugs. I put this in due to the fact that I was putting nitrous on the car. I went way colder than what was in it. Now a hotter plug, this porcelain right here, will hang out further. Alright, kind of like how this plug looks. So this would be a hotter plug. You can see the porcelain right here. The porcelain's what is white. It starts white and then it turns color. So this is a colder plug. You can see how far down that's moved. Alright, these are two totally different plugs. This is actually out of LS if I remember correctly. So, and if you have an LS, LSs don't have distributors, but if you have a carbed LS, this also applies to you guys. You're probably not watching the video 45 minutes in, but however, it does apply when it comes to tuning. And that's anything. It doesn't matter if it's got fuel injection on it or not. You always read the plug. You always verify with the plug. The plug is never going to lie to you. A wideband will lie. 110%. Eventually, the O2 sensor goes bad, especially if it's carbureted, and it'll eventually be off. So if you got a car that's dialed in, it's been dialed in for a while, you're happy, content, it runs good, and one day your wideband goes loopy, whether it's rich or lean. Now, you want to take precautions. So what you're going to do, let's say you've been driving this thing, and out of nowhere it goes either dead rich or dead lean on the wideband. You're going to pull the plugs. You're going to read them. Now, eventually you're going to get to the point you're going to know your car and what your plug looks like when you drive on it and everything. All right? So you're going to know eventually through time, you'll know if it's good or bad. You're going to take the plugs, though. The easiest way to do this, if you don't get to that level right away, you're going to buy a new set of plugs and put fresh plugs in it. It's the first thing you're going to do, and you're going to drive it around. Now, the wideband most likely is not going to fix itself. All right? Now, if it does, because you put plugs in it, then your tune isn't right, because most likely it's too rich and it's found the plugs out. All right? To foul a plug in the amount of time I'm talking about, they would have to be so old. You'd have to be driving this thing for years and never touch the car or make a change to it to foul a plug to the point that I'm talking about. So that's why I'm saying you have a problem, because I'm talking about, like, if you're a couple months in and you never change the plug and it's fouled out, then you got a problem. So wideband should not change off of plugs unless there's a problem. But you put new plugs in, you pull the plug looks good, you put it back in, the wideband's reading all funky with your new plugs. Most likely that O2 sensor's crapped out. So what you can try doing is pulling the sensor out, cleaning it with some, I think they make O2 sensor cleaner, or you can use carbureted cleaner. Clean it up. You're going to have to recalibrate the gauge. There's a sequence. It's on the instructions. Put it back in and see how it does. Now, if it changes, then your sensor's bad. So that's an easy way to figure out air-fuel gauge problems. Little diag for you guys. It's pretty simple. I've had them go bad. I've had them where they're fouled out. And it's not a good time, all right? And it makes you think there's something wrong with the car. I actually know somebody who just had this problem, and they started changing their tune-up, and they actually hurt the car, all right? So that's pretty much tuning 101 in a sense. It's all the important stuff that you need to know wrapped up in a hour video. Kind of ran a little long, but I think this is all important information that people need to know if you're new to this and you have a old school carbureted distributor type vehicle. All right? Leave comments below if there's something that maybe I didn't cover or something you want to hear about if you're new. And I'll try to either get back to you directly through the comments, or I'll make a video on it. So that's pretty much it, guys, all right? At least for tonight. I think I covered pretty much all the important bases here. So thanks for watching. And if you like this stuff, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks again.